Good evening all, and welcome back to Paranoia Files. Tonight I bring you 8 of the most disturbing accounts ever documented by law enforcement officers across this nation. In this episode, we will descend into the darkest corners of police work with 8 harrowing tales that blur the line between duty and terror, between the explainable and the impossible. These are not fabricated stories for your entertainment. Each narrative has been meticulously reconstructed from official reports, witness testimonies, and the sworn statements of officers who encountered horrors they never trained for. From dispatch calls that ended in tragedy to evidence that defies all logic, from patrol shifts haunted by the dead to interrogations that revealed impossible truths. These stories will challenge everything you believe about reality. To protect the identities of the officers and individuals involved, certain names and identifying details have been carefully altered, but the core events remain terrifyingly intact. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Paranoia Files for daily true horror content that will keep you awake long after the lights go out. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when darkness comes calling, because these stories demand to be heard. Last March, I was working the graveyard shift as a 911 dispatcher in a small county outside Portland. I had been doing the job for about 4 years at that point, and I thought I had heard everything. Domestic disputes, medical emergencies, car accidents, break-ins. You name it, I had probably taken the call. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on the night of March 17th. That night changed everything I thought I knew about my job, about safety, and about the monsters that live among us. It started like any other Tuesday night, slow, almost boring. I had taken maybe 6 calls in the first 5 hours of my shift. A noise complaint, a welfare check on an elderly man whose daughter had not heard from him in 2 days. A false alarm at a grocery store. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was sitting at my console drinking my 3rd cup of coffee and scrolling through my phone when the call came in at 2:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I glanced at the clock right before I answered, thinking I only had 4 more hours until I could go home. The woman on the other end of the line was whispering. Not crying, not screaming, but whispering in this urgent, terrified way that immediately put every nerve in my body on high alert. Her name was Grace, and she told me there was someone in her house. She said she had woken up to use the bathroom and heard footsteps downstairs, heavy footsteps. She lived alone in a rural area about 15 miles outside the city limits. No neighbors within shouting distance. No streetlights. Just her house surrounded by woods and darkness. I immediately started the protocol. I kept her on the line, asked her where she was, asked her if she could get to a room with a lock. She told me she was in her bedroom closet with the door closed. She said she could still hear the footsteps. They were moving through her kitchen now. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, and I could hear something else too. A faint creaking sound in the background. Old floorboards, maybe. I dispatched 2 officers to her address, gave them the details, told them possible intruder, caller hiding in bedroom closet, approach with caution. Grace stayed on the line with me. I kept talking to her, kept my voice calm and steady, even though my heart was pounding. I told her help was on the way. I told her to stay quiet, stay hidden, stay on the line with me. She whispered that she could hear the footsteps coming up the stairs now. Slow, deliberate, 1 step at a time. I told her the officers were 8 minutes out. She said she did not think she had 8 minutes. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. I heard a door open, not her closet door, her bedroom door. And then the footsteps were in her room. I was yelling into my headset at that point, asking the officers for their ETA, begging them to hurry. 6 minutes out. Grace had gone completely silent. I could not hear her breathing. Anymore? I could not hear anything except a faint rustling sound and then what I thought might have been a muffled gasp. I kept calling her name. Grace. Grace, can you hear me? Grace, stay with me. Officers are almost there, but there was nothing. Just dead air and that awful rustling sound that made my stomach turn. The officers arrived 4 minutes later. I heard them radio in that they were on scene. Front door was standing wide open. They announced themselves, went inside with weapons drawn. I was listening to everything through their radio traffic while simultaneously still connected to Grace's line, praying I would hear her voice again. The officers cleared the first floor. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. They moved upstairs. I heard one of them call out that he had found the bedroom. The door was open. The room looked undisturbed. And then I heard the words that made my heart sink into my stomach. Her phone is here, on the floor next to the bed, still connected to 911. I looked at my screen. The call was still active. I was still connected. But Grace was not on the other end anymore. The officers searched the closet where she said she was hiding. Empty. They searched the entire house. Bathroom, spare bedroom, basement, attic. Empty. They searched the property outside. Nothing. No Grace, no intruder, no footprints in the soft dirt around the house, even though it had rained earlier that evening. No sign that anyone had left through any of the windows or doors. It was like she had simply vanished into thin air while I was on the phone with her. I gave my statement to the detectives who caught the case. I told them everything I heard, every detail I could remember. They took the recording of the 911 call. They analyzed it. They brought in specialists to listen for background noises, voices, anything that might give them a clue about what happened. And that is when things got even stranger. The specialists found something on the recording that I had not heard in real time. Underneath Grace's whispering, underneath the footsteps and the creaking floorboards, there was breathing. Heavy, labored breathing. And it had been there from the very beginning of the call. From the moment Grace first whispered hello, the detectives went back to the house with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. They were looking for a body. They were sure she was dead, hidden somewhere on the property or buried in the woods nearby. But the dogs did not hit on anything. 3 days into the investigation, they found something that changed the entire trajectory of the case. Behind the water heater in the basement, hidden by old boxes and forgotten storage, they found a door. Not a regular door. A small wooden panel that had been painted the same color as the wall. When they pried it open, they found a tunnel. A hand-dug tunnel barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. It went down at a steep angle into the earth, shored up with rotting boards and old pieces of plywood. The officers called for backup and followed the tunnel. It stretched for almost 50 yards underground before it opened up into a larger space. A crawl space, beneath the house. They found a sleeping bag down there, empty food wrappers, bottles filled with urine, a camping lantern, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of Grace, in her kitchen, in her living room, asleep in her bed. The photos had been taken from inside her house over what looked like weeks or even months. Someone had been living under her house, coming up through that tunnel, watching her, photographing her, and she had no idea. But that was not the worst part. The tunnel did not end in the crawl space. It kept going. The officers followed it for another 70 yards through the darkness until it emerged in the basement of an abandoned property 3 lots over. The house had been foreclosed on 2 years earlier and sat empty ever since. Overgrown yard, boarded windows, no electricity or running water. It was the perfect place for someone to hide, and someone had been hiding there. They found more evidence in that house: clothes, tools, a detailed map of Grace's property with her daily routine written in the margins. Times she left for work, times she came home, times she turned off her lights and went to bed. The investigation revealed that the tunnel had been dug over a period of at least 6 months. Whoever did this had been patient, methodical. They had planned this for a long time. Soil samples showed that the digging had been done in stages, a little bit at a time, so as not to create too much noise or leave obvious piles of dirt. The person who did this knew what they were doing. They knew how to stay hidden. And they knew Grace's schedule well enough to dig when she was not home. But where was Grace? The officers searched both properties again. They searched the tunnel. They brought in more dogs and more equipment. They drained a pond on the abandoned property. They tore up floorboards and dug through the yard. Nothing. No body. No Grace. It was like she had been swallowed by the earth itself. The case went from a possible home invasion to a suspected abduction and murder. But without a body, without a suspect, without any witnesses, the investigation stalled. Then 2 weeks after Grace disappeared, they found her. Or rather, she was found. A hiker stumbled across her body in a densely wooded area about 12 miles from her house. She was partially buried under a pile of leaves and branches, hidden in a ravine that was almost impossible to see from any trail. The medical examiner determined that she had been strangled. Time of death was consistent with the night of the 911 call. She had been killed within an hour of me hearing those footsteps in her bedroom. The autopsy revealed something else, something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Grace had soil under her fingernails, not regular dirt. The soil matched samples taken from the tunnel. She had been in that tunnel. At some point between the moment I lost contact with her and the moment she died, she had been dragged through that tunnel. The detectives theorized that the intruder had grabbed her from the closet, covered her mouth to muffle any sound, and dragged her down into the basement and through the tunnel to the abandoned house. From there, he had transported her to the woods where he killed her and left her body. But who was he? That was the question everyone wanted answered. The police processed every inch of both properties. They lifted fingerprints. They collected DNA from the sleeping bag and the clothes left in the abandoned house. They interviewed everyone who had ever lived on that street or worked in the area, and they came up empty. No matches in any database. No witnesses who saw anything unusual. No one who remembered seeing a stranger in the neighborhood. Whoever did this was a ghost. The case is still open, officially unsolved. There are theories, of course. Some detectives think it was a drifter, someone passing through who saw Grace and became obsessed. Others think it was someone local, someone who knew the area well enough to find that abandoned house and use it as a base. There was even a theory that it might have been someone Grace knew, someone she had rejected or wronged in some way, though her friends and family insist she had no enemies and no recent conflicts with anyone. I think about Grace all the time. I think about those 8 minutes while I was on the phone with her, talking to her, trying to keep her calm, believing that I was helping. I think about the sound of that bedroom door opening. I think about the silence that followed. I wonder if she tried to scream and could not. I wonder if she knew in those final moments that I could not save her. I wonder if she was still alive when they dragged her through that tunnel, or if they killed her in the closet and I just did not hear it happen. The recording of that 911 call haunts me. I have listened to it more times than I should have. I have heard that breathing in the background, that presence that was there from the very beginning. It means he was already in the house when she called. He was there, listening to her whisper to me, listening to her beg for help. Maybe he was standing right outside the closet door. Maybe he was waiting for the perfect moment. Maybe he enjoyed the fear. I still work as a dispatcher. I did not quit, though plenty of people told me I should take time off or find a different job. But I stay because of Grace. Because I need to believe that the next call I take might be different. that the next person who whispers into the phone in the middle of the night might make it, that I might actually save someone. I owe her that much. I owe her the chance to make sure what happened to her does not happen to someone else. Sometimes late at night when the calls are slow and the office is quiet, I think I can still hear her voice, that desperate whisper, that fear. And I think about the monster who lived beneath her house, who watched her sleep, who took his time planning her death. He is still out there, somewhere. Maybe he moved on to another town, another victim, another tunnel. Maybe he is watching someone else right now, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I hope they catch him. I hope someone recognizes something or remembers something or finds some piece of evidence that breaks the case wide open. But until then, I will keep answering calls. I will keep listening. And I will keep hoping that the next Grace who calls will be the one I can actually save. I had been riding solo patrol for about 6 months when my sergeant told me I was getting a new partner. This was back in 2019 and I was working for a mid-sized department in the Midwest. Nothing too exciting usually. Traffic stops, noise complaints, the occasional domestic disturbance. I had been riding alone since my previous partner transferred to another district, and honestly I had gotten used to the solitude. There is something peaceful about night patrol when it is just you in the empty streets. But the department had a policy about rookies. They did not ride alone for their first year. They needed a training officer. And apparently I was it. His name was Lucas. That is what the sergeant told me. Lucas Green, fresh out of the academy. Young kid, maybe 23 or 24. The sergeant handed me his file and told me to take it easy on him, show him the ropes, make sure he did not do anything stupid. I nodded and said, sure, no problem. I figured it would be like training any other rookie. A few weeks of showing him how things really worked versus how they taught it at the academy, and then he would be fine on his own. Our first shift together started on a Wednesday night. I got to the station early, grabbed my gear, and waited by my patrol car. Lucas showed up right on time, punctual. That was a good sign. I watched him walk across the parking lot, and I remember thinking he looked younger than I expected. Clean cut, serious expression. He did not have that nervous energy most rookies have on their first night. No wide eyes or fidgeting hands. He just walked up, introduced himself, shook my hand, and got in the passenger seat without any small talk. We drove in silence for the first hour. I did my usual route, pointing out landmarks and trouble spots as we went. The gas station on 5th Street where we had broken up 3 fights in the past month. The apartment complex on Riverside where domestic calls were a weekly occurrence. The park where teenagers liked to drink after dark. Lucas just nodded and watched. He did not ask questions. He did not try to impress me with academy knowledge. He just observed. It was actually kind of refreshing compared to other rookies I had trained who could not shut up. Around midnight, we got our first call. Suspicious vehicle in a grocery store parking lot. Probably nothing, but we responded anyway. When we pulled into the lot, I spotted the car immediately. Old sedan parked in the far corner away from the lights. Engine off. Someone sitting in the driver's seat. I radioed it in, gave dispatch the plate number, and told Lucas we were going to do a welfare check. Standard procedure. We approached on foot, flashlights out. I took the driver's side. Lucas took the passenger side. The guy in the car was just sleeping. Homeless, probably. He woke up when I tapped on the window, disoriented and confused. I asked for his ID, ran it through dispatch. No wants, no warrants. I told him he could not stay there and suggested a shelter about 3 miles away. He thanked me and drove off. Easy call, textbook. When I got back in the patrol car, I glanced at Lucas and said that was a good first call. Nothing dramatic. He just nodded and said he knew it would be fine. Something about the way he said it struck me as odd, like he had already known the outcome before we even got out of the car. The next few shifts went the same way. Lucas was quiet, observant, and strangely calm for a rookie. Most new officers are either overly eager or visibly nervous during their first weeks. Lucas was neither. He just existed in the passenger seat, watching everything, saying little. But I started to notice something strange. Lucas seemed to know where calls were going to come in before dispatch radioed them to us. Not every call, but enough that it became noticeable. One night we were driving through a residential neighborhood when Lucas suddenly said we should turn left on Maple Street. I asked why. He said he had a feeling. I shrugged and turned. Less than 30 seconds later, dispatch called a burglary in progress 2 blocks down Maple. When we arrived, we caught the suspect climbing out a window. Another night, Lucas suggested we park behind a convenience store on the east side. 5 minutes later, an armed robbery happened inside that store. We were close enough to intercept the suspect as he ran out the back door. At first, I thought it was just luck or good instinct. Maybe Lucas was picking up on patterns I was not seeing. Maybe he had studied crime statistics for the area and was making educated guesses. But it kept happening, over and over. Lucas would suggest we go somewhere, and within minutes a call would come in for that exact location. It was unsettling. I started to wonder if he had some kind of inside information. Maybe he knew someone in dispatch who was tipping him off, but that did not make sense. Why would anyone do that? And how would they communicate without me noticing? I asked him about it one night after we had responded to our third eerily well-timed call of the week. I tried to keep it casual. I said something like, "You have got good instincts for a rookie. How do you always seem to know where the action is going to be?" Lucas just looked at me with this blank expression and said he did not know. He said it just felt right. That answer did not satisfy me, but I dropped it. I figured maybe he was one of those people who had a natural talent for police work. Some people are just wired that way. But then other things started bothering me. Little things I could not quite explain. Like the fact that I never saw Lucas at the station outside of our shifts. I would come in early or stay late, and I would see other officers hanging around, doing paperwork, talking in the break room. But never Lucas. He would show up exactly when our shift started and disappear the moment it ended. I never saw him in the locker room, never saw him at roll call on days we were not scheduled together. It was like he only existed during our shifts. I also realized that other officers did not talk about him. Usually when there is a new rookie, people gossip. They ask how the training is going. They make jokes or share stories, but no one ever asked me about Lucas. No one mentioned him at all. I started to think maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe Lucas was antisocial. Maybe he did not hang out with other cops. Maybe I was reading too much into coincidences and weird timing. Then came the night that changed everything. We were responding to a domestic disturbance in a neighborhood I knew well. Repeat location, same couple, same fight every few weeks. We had been there at least 4 times in the past 2 months. The husband drank too much and got loud. The wife called the cops. We showed up. They both calmed down. We left. It was routine, annoying but routine. We pulled up to the house, got out of the car, and walked to the front door. I knocked, announced ourselves. "Police, open up." The door opened, but instead of the wife or the husband, there was a stranger. A man I had never seen before, and he had a gun. He raised it, pointed it at my chest, and fired. I did not have time to react. I did not have time to draw my weapon or dive out of the way. But Lucas did. He moved faster than I thought possible. He shoved me hard to the right, and I went sprawling off the porch into the bushes. I heard the gunshot, loud, ringing in my ears. I scrambled for my weapon, rolled to cover, and radioed for backup. "Officer down. Shots fired. I looked toward the porch. The shooter was gone, the door was closed, and Lucas was nowhere. I called his name. Lucas. Lucas, where are you? Are you hit? Nothing. No response. I stayed low, moved back toward the porch, weapon drawn. I checked around the corner of the house, no sign of him. Backup arrived 3 minutes later. We breached the door and cleared the house. The shooter was gone. Out the back door and into the woods beyond the property. We searched for hours but never found him, and we never found Lucas either. I was freaking out. I was certain Lucas had been shot. I was certain he was lying somewhere bleeding out or already dead. But there was no blood, no shell casings other than the one from the shooter's gun, no sign that Lucas had ever been there. The other officers looked at me like I was crazy when I kept insisting my partner was missing. They asked me to describe him. I did. Young kid, early 20s, short dark hair, Lucas Green, fresh out of the academy. That is when things got really strange. One of the older officers, a guy named Mason who had been with the department for over 20 years, pulled me aside. He had this look on his face, concerned, almost scared. He asked me if I was feeling all right, if I had been drinking or taking any medication. I told him I was fine and demanded to know why no one was looking for Lucas. Mason put his hand on my shoulder and said there was no Lucas Green in our department. He said there had not been a new hire in over 8 months. He said I had been riding solo for the past 6 months just like always. I did not believe him. I thought he was messing with me or that I was losing my mind. I went back to the station and demanded to see Lucas's file, the one the sergeant had given me. But the sergeant looked at me like I had grown a second head. He said he never gave me any file. He said I had never been assigned a training officer role. I tore through my locker looking for that file. It was not there. I checked the schedule board. My name was listed for solo patrol. No partner. I asked dispatch if they had any record of Lucas Green in their system. They searched. Nothing. No badge number, no radio call sign, no employment record. That is when the panic really set in. I started doubting my own memory. Had I imagined the past 6 months? Was I having some kind of breakdown? But it felt so real. I could remember conversations with Lucas. I could remember him sitting in the passenger seat. I could remember him pushing me out of the way of that bullet. A bullet that should have hit me, a bullet that should have killed me. I went home that night and could not sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to make sense of it. The next day, I went back to the station. I needed answers. I found Mason and cornered him in the break room. I told him everything, every detail. The calls Lucas predicted, the way he seemed to know things before they happened, the way he pushed me out of the way of that bullet and then vanished. Mason listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up, motioned for me to follow him, and led me to a hallway I rarely went down, the one with the memorial wall. The memorial wall was where the department honored officers who had died in the line of duty, photos and plaques with names and dates. Mason stopped in front of one of the photos. He pointed at it. I looked. It was Lucas, same face, same serious expression. But the name under the photo was not Lucas Green. It was Lucas Hart, and the date said he had died 3 years ago, March 14, 2016, killed in the line of duty during a traffic stop gone wrong, shot by a suspect who was never caught. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I stared at that photo for what felt like an eternity. Mason said Lucas had been his partner. He said Lucas was a good cop, one of the best. He said after Lucas died, strange things started happening in the district he used to patrol. Officers reported feeling like they were not alone on calls. They reported gut feelings that kept them out of danger. A few officers over the years had even claimed to see someone matching Lucas's description, though most dismissed it as grief or imagination. Mason said he believed me. He said Lucas had probably been riding with me for the past 6 months, watching over me the same way he had watched over a few other officers since his death. He said Lucas had always had a sixth sense about danger. Even when he was alive, he could predict bad situations before they happened. Mason said it made sense that Lucas would still be doing what he loved even after death, protecting people, preventing tragedies, saving lives. I did not know what to say. I did not know if I believed in ghosts or spirits or whatever Lucas was supposed to be. But I could not deny what I had experienced. I could not deny that someone or something had pushed me out of the way of that bullet. Someone or something had been riding with me, guiding me, keeping me safe. And now that someone was gone, I went back to solo patrol after that. No more Lucas, no more quiet presence in the passenger seat, no more eerily accurate predictions about where calls would come in. It was just me again, alone, and for the first time in months I felt truly vulnerable out there. I kept looking over at the empty passenger seat, half expecting to see him sitting there. But he never appeared again. About a month later, I was driving through the same neighborhood where the shooting happened. I passed the house. It was empty now, foreclosed, boarded up. I slowed down and looked at the porch where I had almost died. And for just a second, I thought I saw someone standing there, a figure. Dark hair, serious expression, watching me. I blinked and the figure was gone, but I felt something, a sense of calm, a sense of being watched over. I think Lucas is still out there, still patrolling, still protecting officers in the district he loved. I think he saved my life that night, and I think he has probably saved others too. People just do not talk about it because it sounds insane. But I know what I experienced. I know who was sitting in that passenger seat for 6 months. And I know that somewhere out there, Lucas Hart is still doing his job, still serving, still protecting. Even death could not stop him from being a cop. And I am grateful for that, because without him, I would not be here to tell this story. My job as evidence technician was supposed to be boring. Catalog items, maintain chain of custody, keep everything organized, make sure nothing gets contaminated or lost. That was it. I was not supposed to be investigating crimes or chasing suspects or putting myself in danger. I took the position specifically because I wanted something stable and predictable after 5 years working patrol. I had seen enough violence, enough tragedy, enough chaos. I wanted to spend my days in a climate-controlled room sorting through bags and boxes and filling out forms. I wanted boring. What I got was anything but. It started in late September when a new item came into the facility. I was working the night shift, which I usually volunteered for because it paid a little extra and the building was quiet. No detectives coming in and out requesting items, no lawyers demanding to review evidence. Just me and rows of shelves and the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The item came in around 11 o'clock. A detective named Elijah dropped it off personally, which was unusual. Normally, evidence gets transported by uniformed officers or processed during day shift. But Elijah said this one needed to be logged immediately because it was connected to an active homicide investigation. The item was an antique mirror. Not huge, maybe 2 feet tall and a foot wide, with an ornate gold frame that looked like it belonged in a museum. The glass was old, slightly warped, with that cloudy quality that antique mirrors have. Elijah told me it had been recovered from the victim's apartment. He did not give me details about the case, just said to catalog it, lock it up, and treat it as high priority. I filled out the paperwork, assigned it an evidence number, took photographs from multiple angles, and placed it on a designated shelf in the secure area. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. Then Elijah left and I went back to my desk to finish the intake forms. About an hour later, I walked back into the evidence room to file some paperwork and nearly had a heart attack. The mirror was sitting on the floor in the middle of the aisle, not on the shelf where I had left it. On the floor, propped up against a box like someone had carefully placed it there. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I knew I had put it on the shelf. I had a clear memory of doing it. I even had the photographs on my computer showing its exact placement. But there it was, 10 feet away from where it should have been. My first thought was that someone had come into the room without me noticing. Maybe another technician or an officer I had not heard enter the building. But I was the only person on duty. The building was locked. The security system would have logged anyone coming in or out. I checked the access records on the computer. No entries except mine from when I had arrived at the start of my shift. I checked the security cameras. We had one camera covering the main entrance to the evidence room. I pulled up the footage from the last hour and watched it. I saw myself walk into the room, place the mirror on the shelf, and walk out. Then nothing. Just an empty hallway. And then I saw myself walk back into the room and stop dead in my tracks, which was the moment I had discovered the mirror on the floor. But here is the thing. The camera never showed the mirror moving. One moment, it was on the shelf. The next moment, during a split second when the camera angle shifted slightly during its automated pan, it was on the floor, like it had teleported. I watched the footage 5 times trying to spot something I had missed. A person, a shadow, anything. But there was nothing. The mirror had moved on its own. I told myself I was tired, that I had made a mistake somehow, placed it on the floor without realizing it, maybe been distracted or half asleep. I picked up the mirror, put it back on the shelf, and made sure it was secure. Then I went back to my desk and tried to focus on other work. But I could not stop thinking about it, about how heavy that mirror was, about how carefully it had been propped against that box like someone had taken their time positioning it. About the security footage that showed something impossible. 2 hours later, I went back to check on it. The mirror was gone from the shelf again. This time it was across the room, leaning against the wall near the door. The door I had to walk through to enter the room. The door I absolutely would have noticed if a 2-foot mirror was blocking it. But I had not noticed. I had walked right past it somehow without seeing it, or it had moved after I entered. Either option was equally terrifying. I called Elijah. I did not care that it was 2 in the morning. I told him something was wrong with the evidence from his case, that the mirror kept moving, that I had it on camera and I needed him to come see it. He sounded skeptical, but he said he would be there in 20 minutes. While I waited, I decided to research the case. I pulled up the file using the evidence number. The victim was a woman named Abigail, 43 years old, found dead in her apartment by a neighbor who noticed her door was open. Cause of death was listed as inconclusive pending toxicology. But there were notes in the file that made my skin crawl. Abigail had been found in front of that mirror, on the floor, staring at it. Her eyes were open. And according to the notes, there was no sign of struggle, no defensive wounds, no clear cause of death. She had just died there, looking at her own reflection. The file also mentioned that Abigail had recently purchased the mirror from an estate sale. The estate had belonged to a woman who died in a house fire in the 1970s. That woman's name was Lily. I kept digging. I found old newspaper articles about the fire. Lily had been involved in some kind of occult group back in the 70s. The fire that killed her was ruled suspicious, but never definitively classified as arson. Her house had been filled with strange items, artifacts, books on ritual magic, and mirrors. Lots of mirrors. The article mentioned that mirrors were used in certain occult practices for scrying, for contacting spirits, for trapping souls. Elijah arrived while I was reading. I showed him the security footage. I showed him the mirror, now positioned near the door again, even though I had moved it back to the shelf 15 minutes earlier. I showed him the research I had found about Lily and the occult connection. Elijah listened to everything without interrupting. Then he told me something he had not included in the official report. He said when they found Abigail's body, there were words written on the mirror in condensation, like someone had breathed on it and traced letters with their finger. The words said, "Let me out." We decided to document everything. I got my body camera and turned it on. We set up a fixed camera in the evidence room aimed at the mirror. We watched it for 30 minutes. Nothing happened. And then, while we were both staring directly at it, the surface of the mirror seemed to ripple, like water, just for a second. And in that ripple I saw something, a face, not my reflection, not Elijah's reflection, a woman's face, pale, eyes wide, mouth open like she was screaming, but no sound came out. Then it was gone and we were looking at our own reflections again. Elijah pulled his phone out and called his captain. He explained the situation, which I know sounded absolutely insane, but his captain must have taken him seriously because 20 minutes later there were 4 people in the evidence room. The captain, a lieutenant I did not recognize, a detective from another unit, and someone they introduced as a consultant. The consultant did not look like a cop. She looked like a professor. Glasses, cardigan, canvas bag full of books. Her name was Grace, and she said she specialized in historical artifacts and folklore. Grace examined the mirror without touching it. She took photographs. She read the file about Lily and the estate sale. Then she told us something that made everything click into place. She said mirrors like this one were sometimes used in binding rituals. The idea was that you could trap a spirit or a soul inside the mirror, keep it contained, prevent it from moving on. Lily had been practicing this kind of ritual work before she died, and if the mirror had been in the fire with her, if she had died while performing a ritual involving that mirror, it was possible her spirit had been bound to it. And now, decades later, that spirit was still trapped, still trying to get out, still desperate enough to reach through and take anyone who looked too long into the glass. The decision was made to destroy the mirror. Not just break it, but completely obliterate it. They have protocols for this kind of thing, apparently. Dangerous occult objects connected to open investigations. It is rare, but not unheard of. The mirror was transported to an industrial facility where it was incinerated at temperatures high enough to turn the glass and frame into slag. Grace performed some kind of cleansing ritual beforehand. I do not know if it was official procedure or just something she felt needed to be done, but she said words over the mirror, something about releasing what was bound and letting it pass on. I never had another incident in the evidence room after that. No more objects moving on their own, no more faces in reflections, no more impossible security footage. But I think about that mirror all the time, about Abigail staring at it in her final moments, about Lily trapped inside it for 50 years, about how close I came to looking into it too long, to seeing whatever Abigail saw that stopped her heart. I still work nights, I still catalog evidence, but now I pay attention to where things come from. And if something ever comes in that feels wrong, that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, I do not wait to call someone. Because I learned the hard way that some evidence is not just evidence. Some of it is dangerous, some of it should never have been kept at all, never have. Responding to wellness checks was usually straightforward. Knock on the door, verify the person is okay, file the report, and move on to the next call. In my 8 years as a patrol officer, I must have done hundreds of them. Most of the time, it was nothing. An elderly person who forgot to call their family back. A neighbor who was out of town and did not tell anyone. Simple misunderstandings that got resolved in 5 minutes. But the wellness check I responded to in November changed everything I thought I knew about my job and about the people living in our community. It was a Thursday afternoon when dispatch sent me and my partner Henry to a rural property about 20 miles outside of town. The call came from a neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who lived about a quarter mile down the road. She said she had not seen her neighbor, a man named Carter, in almost 2 weeks. His mailbox was overflowing. His truck had not moved. She had knocked on his door several times and got no answer. She was worried. Carter was in his 70s, lived alone, and had some health issues. It seemed like a standard welfare check. Henry and I drove out to the property. It was isolated, the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is far enough away that you could scream and no one would hear you. Thick woods surrounded the house on 3 sides. A long gravel driveway. No other homes visible in any direction. The house itself was old but well maintained. A single-story ranch style with white siding and a covered porch. Carter's truck was parked in the driveway, just like Mrs. Patterson had said. Everything looked normal from the outside except for one thing. The smell. As soon as we got out of the patrol car, we both noticed it. That distinct, unmistakable odor of decomposition. Henry and I exchanged a look. We had both smelled it before. It meant we were not doing a wellness check anymore. We were recovering a body. I radioed dispatch to let them know what we were dealing with and requested a supervisor and the medical examiner. Then Henry and I approached the house. The front door was unlocked. We knocked and announced ourselves anyway. Police, we are coming in. No response. We pushed the door open and the smell hit us like a wall. Stronger inside, much stronger. We covered our noses and mouths and moved through the house. The living room was tidy, furniture arranged neatly, television remote on the coffee table, a half-finished cup of coffee on a side table with mold growing on the surface. We moved down the hallway toward the bedrooms. That is where we found him. Carter was lying on his bed, fully clothed, hands folded across his chest. He had been dead for at least a week, maybe longer. The decomposition was advanced. But here is what struck me as odd. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Like he had arranged himself that way before he died. People who die of natural causes do not usually look like that. They do not fold their hands. They do not position themselves perfectly centered on the bed. It looked staged, like someone had placed him there after he died. Henry called it in while I secured the scene. We waited outside for the supervisor and the medical examiner to arrive. While we were waiting, I walked around the property. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. The staged body, the unlocked door, the isolated location. I was not sure what I was looking for, but I kept looking. That is when I noticed the basement door. It was around the side of the house, one of those angled cellar doors that opens from the outside, the kind you see in old houses. It was partially hidden by overgrown bushes. I pulled the bushes aside and tried the door. It was unlocked. I called Henry over and we opened it. Wooden stairs led down into darkness. I clicked on my flashlight and we descended into the basement. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, boxes stacked along the walls. Nothing unusual at first glance. But then I noticed another door at the far end of the basement. It was partially hidden behind a tall metal shelving unit. Henry and I moved the shelving unit aside and opened the door. What we found behind it made my stomach drop. It was a room, a hidden room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, no windows, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. And inside that room was evidence of multiple people having been kept there. Mattresses on the floor, chains bolted to the wall, empty water bottles, food wrappers, and scratches. Deep scratches in the drywall, the kind of scratches someone makes when they are trying to claw their way out. I immediately radioed for more units and for detectives. This was not a wellness check anymore. This was a crime scene. Henry and I backed out of the room and secured the basement. We did not touch anything. We did not move anything. We just waited for the detectives to arrive. When they did, they brought crime scene techs and cadaver dogs. What they found over the next several hours was worse than anything I could have imagined. The dogs hit on multiple locations around the property, behind the house, in the woods, near an old shed at the edge of the property line. The techs started digging. They found bodies, 11 bodies in total, all male, ranging in age from late teens to early 40s. All had been buried in shallow graves. Some had been there for years based on the level of decomposition. Others were more recent. The medical examiner estimated that the most recent victim had been buried within the last 6 months. The detectives found journals in the house, detailed journals written by Carter documenting everything. When he had taken each victim, where he had picked them up, how long he had kept them in that room, how he had killed them. The entries went back 15 years of abducting people, holding them prisoner and murdering them. The victims were transients, hitchhikers, drifters, people who would not be immediately missed, people whose disappearances would not trigger major investigations. But the journals revealed something even more disturbing. Carter had not been working alone. There were references throughout the journals to someone he called his partner. Never a name, just the partner. Entries that described the partner helping with abductions, the partner bringing supplies, the partner disposing of bodies. The partner was involved in every aspect of these crimes, and we had no idea who the partner was. The investigation expanded. Detectives interviewed everyone who knew Carter. Neighbors, former co-workers, friends, family, no one could believe it. Everyone described Carter as quiet, polite, kept to himself. No one had ever suspected anything, and no one could identify who the partner might have been. The detectives analyzed the journals for clues. Handwriting analysis confirmed that only one person had written in the journals: Carter. There were no other fingerprints in the hidden room or on the evidence recovered from the property. Just Carter's. It was like the partner was a ghost. They found photographs in the house. Hundreds of photographs of the victims. Before, during, after. Some of the photographs showed Carter and the victims together. But in several photographs, there was a second person. Their face was always obscured, turned away from the camera, hidden in shadow, wearing a mask. The partner was careful. The partner knew how to avoid being identified, and the partner was still out there. Carter had died of a heart attack, according to the medical examiner. Natural causes. He had probably been dead for about 10 days when we found him. But the timing bothered me. Why had he staged himself like that on the bed? Why had he folded his hands? The detectives theorized that Carter knew he was dying, that he felt the heart attack coming and arranged himself that way intentionally. Maybe it was vanity. Maybe it was some twisted sense of ceremony. We would never know for sure. The case generated massive media attention. The FBI got involved because some of the victims had been taken from different states. There was a task force created specifically to identify the partner. They released information about the case to the public, hoping someone would recognize a pattern or remember something useful. Tips came in by the hundreds. Detectives followed every lead. But nothing panned out. The partner remained unidentified. It has been 3 years since we found those bodies on Carter's property. 3 years since we uncovered one of the worst serial murder cases in the state's history. The case is still officially open. The partner is still out there. And that terrifies me. Because whoever the partner is, they know how to stay hidden. They know how to avoid detection. They helped Carter abduct and murder 11 people over 15 years and left no trace, no DNA, no fingerprints, no identifiable images, nothing. I still drive past that property sometimes. It has been seized by the state and sits empty now. Condemned. The house is boarded up. The driveway is overgrown. But I think about what happened there. I think about the victims who died in that basement room. I think about their families who finally got answers after years of not knowing. And I think about the partner. Where are they now? Have they found someone else to work with? Are they still abducting people? Are they watching the news coverage and laughing at how close we came but never caught them? The worst part is not knowing. Not knowing who they are, not knowing if they are someone I have encountered before, someone I have talked to, someone who lives in our community, someone who looks normal and acts normal and hides a monster underneath. That is what keeps me up at night. The idea that evil does not always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like your neighbor. Sometimes it knocks on your door asking to borrow sugar. Sometimes it walks past you in the grocery store and smiles. I get letters sometimes, anonymous letters sent to the station addressed to me. They started about 6 months after we found Carter's body. The letters never say much, just a few sentences, things like "you were so close," or "I am still here," or "you will never find me." The detectives have analyzed the letters. No usable evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA. Generic paper and envelopes purchased from common stores, postmarked from different cities each time. The sender is careful, just like they were careful helping Carter for 15 years. I do not know if the person sending the letters is actually the partner or just some sick individual trying to mess with me. But I keep every letter. I keep them in a file folder at my desk, and I read them sometimes hoping I will notice something. A pattern, a clue, anything that might help us identify who is sending them. Because if it is the partner, then they are taunting us. They are reminding us that they got away. And they are telling us that they are still out there, still free, still dangerous, and there is nothing we can do about it. Highway 76 has a bad reputation, especially the stretch between mile markers 15 and 18. Ask any trooper who has worked this area for more than a year and they will tell you stories. Stories about accidents that should not have happened. Stories about vehicles that appear out of nowhere. Stories about drivers who vanish. I have been patrolling this highway for 6 years now, and I have seen things I cannot explain. Things that made me question my own sanity. Things that made me understand why the turnover rate for troopers assigned to this sector is so high. Most people transfer out within a year. The ones who stay either learn to live with it or they stop talking about what they see. I am one of the ones who stopped talking, until now. It started on a Tuesday night in April. I was working the evening shift 7 to 3 in the morning. Traffic was light, a few semis, the occasional car, nothing unusual. Around 11:30, I got a call from dispatch about a single vehicle accident at mile marker 17. Caller reported seeing a car off the road, driver's side door open, no sign of the driver. I was about 5 minutes away, so I responded and told dispatch I was en route. When I arrived, I found exactly what the caller had described: a blue Honda sedan off the right side of the road, front end crumpled against a tree. The driver's side door was hanging open. The engine was still running, headlights still on. I approached with caution, announced myself, checked inside the vehicle. No driver, no passengers. But there was blood on the steering wheel. Not a lot, but enough to indicate the driver had been injured. I radioed it in and started looking for a trail. There was blood on the ground outside the driver's door. Drops leading into the woods that lined the highway. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the trail. It was fresh. The blood was still wet. I called out as I walked, identifying myself as state police, saying I was there to help. No response. The trail went about 50 yards into the woods and then just stopped. No more blood drops, no footprints, no sign of anyone. Just trees and darkness and silence. I searched the area for another 20 minutes but found nothing. It was like the driver had vanished into thin air. I went back to the vehicle and called for a tow truck. While I waited, I searched the car more thoroughly. Registration was in the glove box. Vehicle belonged to a woman named Emily Turner. Address in a town about 40 miles north. I ran the plates and the name through dispatch. No wants or warrants. Vehicle was not reported stolen. I found a purse on the passenger seat with a wallet inside. Driver's license confirmed Emily Turner, 32 years old. The photo showed a woman with dark hair and a nervous smile. I took photos of everything, documented the scene, and had the vehicle towed to the impound lot. I filed my report and figured detectives would follow up with Emily Turner the next day. Maybe she had wandered off in shock after the accident. Maybe someone had picked her up. Maybe she was at a hospital somewhere getting treated for her injuries. These things happen. People panic after accidents and do irrational things. I did not think much more about it until the following week when I got the same call. Single vehicle accident. Mile marker 17, blue Honda sedan. Driver's side door open, no sign of driver. I thought dispatch had made a mistake. I told them I had already responded to that call last week that the vehicle had been towed. The dispatcher sounded confused and said this was a new call, just came in 10 minutes ago. I drove to mile marker 17 and my stomach dropped. There was the blue Honda, same car, same tree, same position. Driver's side door hanging open, engine running, headlights on. I checked the plates, same plates. Emily Turner's car, the car I had personally watched get loaded onto a tow truck and taken to the impound lot 7 days earlier. I radioed dispatch and told them to confirm the location of the impounded vehicle from last week's accident. They checked and called me back. The vehicle was still at the impound lot. They sent me a photo from the lot's security camera showing the blue Honda sitting in Bay 7. But I was looking at the exact same car on the side of Highway 76. Same make, same model, same license plate, same damage, same blood on the steering wheel. I was looking at an impossible duplicate. I called my supervisor. I tried to explain what I was seeing, but it sounded insane even to my own ears. He told me to process the scene like any other accident and he would meet me there. While I waited, I followed the blood trail into the woods again. Same trail, same 50 yards, same abrupt ending. No driver, no footprints, nothing. When my supervisor arrived, we searched the vehicle together. Same registration, same purse, same wallet, same driver's license for Emily Turner. Everything was identical to what I had found the week before. We had the vehicle towed again. This time I followed the tow truck all the way to the impound lot and watched them put it in Bay 9, right next to the identical Honda in Bay 7. 2 blue Hondas, same plates, same VIN numbers, same everything. The impound manager did not know what to make of it. He pulled up his records and confirmed that the first vehicle had been there continuously since it was brought in. Security footage showed no one had accessed it or moved it. But here was a second one, identical in every way. My supervisor contacted detectives and they started investigating. They tried to reach Emily Turner at the address on her license. No one was home. Neighbors said they had not seen her in weeks. Her employer said she had not shown up for work in over 2 weeks and was not answering calls. Her family, when detectives finally tracked them down, said they had been trying to reach her for days and were getting worried. Detectives obtained a warrant and entered her apartment. Empty. No sign of struggle. No note. It was like she had simply disappeared. Then I started digging into the history of mile marker 17. I went to the department archives and looked up old accident reports for that section of highway. What I found made my blood run cold. 10 years earlier, there had been a fatal single vehicle accident at the exact same spot. April 19th, A woman named Emily Turner had lost control of her vehicle and crashed into a tree. She had been ejected from the car and her body was found 50 yards into the woods. Cause of death was blunt force trauma. The report included photos. The vehicle was a blue Honda sedan, the same model. And when I checked the old evidence logs, I found that the license plate number matched. It was the same car, the same woman, the same accident. But it had happened 10 years ago. I showed the report to my supervisor and to the detectives. No one knew what to say. The dates lined up. April 19th, 10 years ago, was the same date as my first call. The accident I had responded to the previous week, and the second call had come in exactly 7 days later. We checked the calendar. The original accident had happened on a Tuesday. My first call had been on a Tuesday. The second call had been on a Tuesday. It was repeating. The same accident, the same victim, the same impossible scenario playing out like a recording stuck on loop. We decided to stake out mile marker 17 the following Tuesday. 3 of us. My supervisor, another trooper named Abigail, and myself. We parked just off the road with our lights off and waited. Around 11:30, exactly the time of the original accident, we saw it happen. The blue Honda appeared, not drove up, not came around the curve. It appeared. 1 second the road was empty and the next second the Honda was there, swerving, losing control, slamming into the tree. We saw the impact. We heard the crunch of metal. We saw the driver's side door fly open. And we saw her, Emily Turner, stumbling out of the car, blood on her face, looking confused and terrified. She took a few steps toward the woods and then she saw us. She looked right at us, and she screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of recognition. Like she knew us, like she had seen us before. She turned and ran into the woods and we ran after her. We called out to her, told her to stop, told her we were there to help, but she kept running. We followed her exactly 50 yards into the trees and then she stopped, just froze. She turned to look at us one more time and I will never forget the expression on her face. It was not fear. It was resignation, like she knew what was about to happen. And then she vanished, not ran away, not fell. She just ceased to exist. One moment she was standing there and the next moment she was gone. We searched the area for hours. We brought in dogs. We brought in more officers. We used thermal imaging. We found nothing. No footprints. No blood trail. No Emily. We went back to the Honda. It was still there, still wrecked, still running. But when we checked the impound lot, there were now 3 identical blue Hondas. The original one from 10 years ago that had somehow never been disposed of properly. The one from my first call last week, and now this one, 3 impossible duplicates. I requested a transfer after that night. I could not patrol that highway anymore, could not drive past mile marker 17 without feeling sick. But before I left, I did more research. I found records going back 20 years. Every year on April 19th, someone called in an accident at mile marker 17. Every year it was the same description. Blue Honda, single vehicle, driver missing. And every year for the past decade, the responding officer filed a report that made no sense. Reports about duplicate vehicles, about blood trails that led nowhere, about a woman who could not possibly be there because she had died 10 years earlier. Emily Turner died on April 19th, 10 years ago, but some part of her is still there, still crashing, still stumbling into those woods, still vanishing 50 yards in. And every year on that date, she does it again. I do not know why. I do not know how. Maybe she does not know she is dead. Maybe she is trapped in that moment, reliving her death over and over. Maybe the universe glitched somehow and that accident became permanent, a scar in reality that replays eternally. I do not have answers. I just know that I will never work Highway 76 again. And I will never forget the look on Emily Turner's face when she realized she was caught in a loop she could never escape. I was not supposed to be in the interrogation room that night, but Detective Jackson needed someone to observe. His usual partner had called in sick, and the suspect they had brought in was refusing to talk unless there were only 2 people in the room. One detective asking questions and one witness. That was the deal. I was a junior detective, barely 6 months out of uniform, and I had never observed an interrogation for a case this serious. A missing person case that everyone suspected had become a homicide. But Jackson trusted me to sit quietly and take notes, so I said yes. The suspect's name was Henry, mid-40s, thin, nervous energy. He had walked into the station 3 hours earlier and told the desk sergeant he had information about the missing woman. Her name was Abigail Phillips. She had been missing for 4 days. Last seen leaving work on Friday evening. Her car was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot, purse still inside, keys in the ignition, no sign of struggle, no witnesses, no leads. Until Henry walked in claiming he knew where she was. Jackson and I entered the interrogation room together. Henry was sitting at the metal table, hands folded, staring at nothing. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, uncombed hair, wrinkled clothes. Jackson sat across from him. I sat in the corner with my notepad. Jackson started with the basics: name, address, how he knew Abigail. Henry answered in a monotone voice. He said he did not know Abigail, had never met her, did not know what she looked like or where she worked, but he knew where she was. He knew because he had seen it. Jackson asked what he meant by seen it. Henry said he had dreamed it. He said he had been having dreams about Abigail for the past week. Dreams where he saw her abduction, her death, where her body was hidden. He described the dreams in detail, how a man had grabbed her in the parking lot, how he had drugged her and put her in his trunk, how he had driven to a remote location and strangled her, how he had buried her in a shallow grave near an old barn off County Road 14. Henry said the dreams were so vivid that he could not ignore them anymore. He had to tell someone. He had to help find her. Jackson asked if Henry was confessing to the crime. Henry said no. He said he did not kill Abigail. He said he had never even been to County Road 14. He had an alibi for the time of her disappearance. He had been at work. Dozens of witnesses could confirm it, but he knew what had happened to her because he had seen it in his dreams. Jackson asked how that was possible. Henry said he did not know. He said it had been happening to him his whole life. Dreams that came true. Visions of things that had not happened yet or were happening far away. He said he usually ignored them, tried to convince himself they were just nightmares. But the dreams about Abigail were different. They were too clear, too specific. He could not ignore them. Jackson looked at me. I could tell he was skeptical. We both were. This sounded like either a confession disguised as something supernatural or a disturbed individual wasting our time. But Jackson decided to test him. He asked Henry to describe the location where Abigail was buried. Henry closed his eyes and started talking. He described an old red barn, rusted metal roof, missing doors, surrounded by overgrown fields. He said the barn was about 200 yards off the main road. There was a dirt path leading to it. He said Abigail was buried on the north side of the barn, approximately 15 feet from the corner, 3 feet deep. She was wrapped in a blue tarp. Jackson wrote everything down. He asked Henry to describe what Abigail was wearing. Henry said jeans, a gray sweater, white sneakers, a silver necklace with a small cross pendant. Jackson checked his notes from the missing person report. Abigail's family had described her outfit the day she disappeared. Jeans, gray sweater, white sneakers. They had not mentioned a necklace, but Jackson made a note to ask. He asked Henry to describe the man who had taken her. Henry said he had seen him in the dreams, but the face was always blurry. He could not make out features, just general details. White male, average height, dark jacket, driving a dark-colored sedan. Jackson ended the interview and told Henry to wait. We stepped outside and Jackson called the sheriff's department. He requested a search team for County Road 14. He described the location Henry had given. The dispatcher said she knew the barn. It was on an abandoned property that had been foreclosed on years earlier. No one lived there. Jackson told them to get a team out there immediately and call him back with whatever they found. Then he ran a background check on Henry. No criminal record, no history of mental illness. Employed as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown. Married. 2 kids, no red flags. Just an ordinary guy claiming to have psychic dreams. 2 hours later, Jackson got the call. The search team had found her, Abigail Phillips, buried on the north side of the barn. 15 feet from the corner, 3 feet deep, wrapped in a blue tarp, wearing jeans, a gray sweater, white sneakers, and a silver necklace with a cross pendant. Everything Henry had described was accurate. The medical examiner confirmed she had been strangled. Time of death was consistent with the night she disappeared. Jackson hung up the phone and stared at me. Neither of us knew what to say. We brought Henry back into the interrogation room. Jackson told him they had found Abigail exactly where he said she would be, exactly how he had described. Henry just nodded like he already knew. Jackson asked him again if he had anything to do with her death. Henry said no. He said he had never been to that location, had never met Abigail, had no connection to her or her family. He said he was just the messenger. Jackson asked if Henry had information about who did kill her. Henry said the dreams did not work that way. He said he saw events but not always the people involved, not clearly enough to identify them. Jackson had Henry take a polygraph test. He passed. The examiner said Henry genuinely believed everything he was saying. He believed he had seen these things in dreams. He believed he had no involvement in the crime. Jackson verified Henry's alibi. He had been at work during the time Abigail was abducted. Security footage showed him entering the building at 8 in the morning and not leaving until 6 in the evening. Co-workers confirmed he had been in meetings all day. There was no way he could have been involved. But the detectives working the case ran into a problem. They had a body. They had a cause of death, but they had no suspect, no physical evidence at the scene, no witnesses, no DNA. The man Henry had described was too generic. It could have been anyone. The car was too common, dark sedan. That described thousands of vehicles. They were back to square one. Except now they knew Henry's dreams were real, or at least accurate, and that opened up a disturbing possibility. Jackson asked Henry if he had ever helped police before. Henry hesitated. Then he admitted he had, 3 times over the past 10 years. He had called in anonymous tips based on dreams he had, tips that led to the discovery of bodies or the capture of suspects. He said he never wanted credit, never wanted attention, he just wanted to help. He said the dreams made him feel guilty, like he was supposed to do something, like he was responsible for stopping the things he saw. But he could not always see enough to stop them. He could only see enough to help afterward. Jackson asked if Henry was having any other dreams currently. Henry went quiet. He looked uncomfortable. Jackson pressed him. Henry finally said yes. He said he was having dreams about another murder, one that had not happened yet. He said he had been seeing it for the past few nights. A woman, brunette, late 20s, being attacked in her home, strangled. The dreams were not clear yet, not specific enough to know who or where, but he said they were getting clearer, and that meant it was going to happen soon. Jackson asked Henry to describe the woman. Henry closed his eyes. He said she was slender, long brown hair. He said she wore glasses. He said he had seen her kitchen, white cabinets, tile floor, a small table by the window. He said there was a calendar on the wall. He could not read what it said, but there was a picture of a beach. Jackson asked if he had seen anything outside, any landmarks, street signs. Henry said no, just the inside of the house, just the woman, just the attack. Jackson looked at me when Henry said the woman wore glasses. I wear glasses. I have long brown hair. I am in my late 20s. My kitchen has white cabinets and a tile floor. I have a small table by the window, and I have a calendar on my wall with pictures of beaches. Jackson saw Jackson, the recognition on my face. He asked Henry if he had ever seen this woman before, in real life. Henry opened his eyes and looked directly at me. He said no. Then he looked closer. His face went pale. He said, "Oh no." He said it was me. He said I was the woman in his dreams. I felt my stomach drop. Jackson immediately put me in protective custody. I stayed at a safe house for 2 weeks. Plainclothes officers watched my apartment. They monitored anyone who came near it. They checked security footage from my building and my workplace. They looked for anyone suspicious, anyone who fit the description from Henry's dream. Dark jacket, average height. They found nothing, but Henry kept having the dreams. He called Jackson every day with updates, more details. The man was getting closer. The attack was coming soon. Then one night I was at the safe house and got a call from Jackson. They had caught someone trying to break into my apartment. A man matching the description, dark jacket, average height. He had tools to pick the lock, a rope in his pocket. When they searched his car, they found a bag with duct tape, zip ties, and a knife. They found photographs of me, taken over several weeks, leaving work, walking to my car, entering my apartment building. He had been stalking me, planning it. And if Henry had not warned us, if I had not been in protective custody, I would have been home that night. I would have been his next victim. The man was arrested and charged with attempted murder and stalking. During interrogation, he confessed to killing Abigail Phillips. He said he had been planning to kill me the same way. He said he chose random women. No connection, no pattern, just opportunity. He would have gotten away with it if not for Henry's dreams. Henry still has the dreams. He still calls with information. He helps solve cases that no one else can. But he refuses to be publicly identified. He does not want the attention or the scrutiny. He just wants to use whatever this ability is to help people, to save lives. And he saved mine. I do not understand how his dreams work. I do not know if it is psychic ability or something else, but I know it is real, and I am alive because of it. The old 5th Precinct building had been abandoned for 12 years when they sent us to sweep it before demolition. I was partnered with Mason that day, both of us tasked with what we thought would be a simple job. Walk through the building, make sure no squatters or homeless people had gotten inside, check for any hazards, and clear it for the demolition crew scheduled to arrive the following week. The city had built a new, modern facility across town back in 2008 and left the old precinct to rot. 12 years of broken windows, peeling paint, and neglect. 12 years of being a forgotten relic. We figured we would be in and out in an hour. We were wrong. The building looked worse than I expected. 3 stories of red brick covered in graffiti and ivy. Most of the windows on the ground floor were boarded up. The front entrance was chained shut, but we had bolt cutters and the key to the padlock from the city facilities department. Mason cut through the chain and we pushed open the heavy metal door. The smell hit us immediately. Mold, decay, and something else. Something stale and wrong. The kind of smell that makes you want to turn around and leave. The interior was dark, The electricity had been shut off years ago. We clicked on our flashlights and started on the ground floor. The main lobby was filled with debris, ceiling tiles that had fallen, broken furniture, piles of paperwork scattered across the floor. Water damage had turned the walls black with mold. We moved through carefully, checking each room. Old offices, a break room with a refrigerator hanging open, bathrooms with shattered mirrors. Everything was exactly as you would expect in an abandoned building, depressing but not dangerous. We moved to the second floor. More offices, more debris, more evidence of time and neglect. Mason commented that it was sad seeing the place like this. He had worked out of this building early in his career. He pointed out where his desk used to be, where the sergeant's office was, where they used to have roll call every morning. I could hear the nostalgia in his voice, but there was something else too, something uncomfortable, like he was remembering things he would rather forget. The third floor was the worst. Structural damage from a roof leak had left parts of the floor unstable. We moved slowly, testing each step. This floor had housed records and evidence storage back when the building was operational. We found filing cabinets tipped over, their contents spilled across the floor. Boxes stacked haphazardly, and at the far end of the hallway, a door marked evidence room. The door was closed but not locked. Mason and I looked at each other. We both knew that when the department moved to the new building, everything was supposed to have been transferred. Records digitized, evidence relocated, nothing should have been left behind. We opened the door. The evidence room was smaller than I expected, maybe 20 feet by 30 feet. Metal, shelving units lined the walls, most of them empty. But some were not. There were boxes on the shelves, evidence bags, items that had been forgotten or overlooked during the move. Mason swore under his breath. He said this was a problem. Everything in this room should have been accounted for. The fact that it was still here meant someone had failed to do their job. Or worse, someone had deliberately left it behind. We started documenting what we found, taking photos, making notes. Most of the items were old, evidence from cases that were probably closed decades ago. But then I found something that made me stop. A box labeled with a case number and a date, 1998. The label said missing child case. I opened the box. Inside were evidence bags containing clothing, photographs, and a file folder. I pulled out the folder and started reading. The case involved a 7-year-old girl named Chloe who had disappeared from a park. She was never found. The case went cold after 6 months. But inside this folder was something that should not have been there. It was a letter, handwritten, dated 3 months after Chloe disappeared. The letter was a confession, someone admitting to taking Chloe, describing where they had buried her body. The letter included details that only the person who took her would know. What she was wearing, what she said before she died, where exactly on a rural property she was buried. The letter was signed with initials but no full name, and clipped to the letter was a note that made my blood run cold. The note said, "Paid in full, do not log, destroy after case closes." It was written on department letterhead, signed by an officer whose name I recognized. Officer Roberts. He had been a senior detective in 1998. He had retired in 2005 and died in 2010. But this note suggested he had taken a bribe. He had buried this confession letter to protect whoever wrote it. Mason read the note over my shoulder. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said we needed to take this to the captain immediately. This was not just old evidence. This was proof of corruption. Proof that a child's murder had been covered up. Proof that someone had gotten away with it because a cop had been paid off. We took the entire box and continued our sweep. But I could not stop thinking about that letter. About Chloe. About her family who never got answers. who probably spent decades wondering what happened to their daughter. We finished the sweep and drove straight to the station. We brought the box to the captain's office and explained what we had found. The captain's face went pale as he read the confession letter and the note from Officer Roberts. He immediately called in the chief and the department's internal affairs division. Within an hour, there were 6 people in that office: detectives, lawyers, the district attorney. Everyone trying to figure out what to do with this information. The decision was made to reopen the case. They pulled all the original files. They interviewed everyone who had been involved in the investigation back in 1998. Most were retired, a few had died, but the ones who were alive all said the same thing. They remembered the case. They remembered it going cold, but none of them remembered a confession letter. Officer Roberts had buried it so well that even his own colleagues never knew it existed. The confession letter described the burial location in detail. A rural property about 30 miles outside the city, behind an old barn, near a cluster of trees. The property had belonged to a family named the Turners. The investigators pulled records and found that the property had been sold in 2001. The new owners had no idea about its history. Detectives obtained a warrant and brought cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar to the location described in the letter. They found her, Chloe. Exactly where the letter said she would be. Her remains were buried 3 feet deep behind the barn near a cluster of oak trees. After 27 years, her family finally had answers. Finally had closure. The medical examiner confirmed the identity through dental records. Chloe's parents, who were now in their 60s, were notified. According to the detectives who spoke with them, they cried, not just from grief, but from relief. They had spent almost 3 decades not knowing, and now they knew. The investigation into Officer Roberts revealed a pattern. Detectives went back through every case he had worked during his career. They cross-referenced cases that had gone cold or been closed without resolution. They found financial records showing deposits into his bank account that did not match his salary. Deposits that coincided with certain cases being dropped or evidence being lost. Over the course of his career, Officer Roberts had taken bribes at least 6 times that they could prove. 6 cases where justice had been buried because he had been paid off. The department launched a full internal investigation. They went back to the abandoned precinct building and conducted a thorough search of the evidence room. They found 5 more cases where evidence had been deliberately hidden or mishandled. 5 more families who had been denied justice because of corruption. The findings were made public. The department issued formal apologies to the families. Cold cases were reopened. Some led to arrests. Others provided closure even though the perpetrators were dead or beyond prosecution. But the discovery of those hidden files raised questions that nobody wanted to answer. How many other cases had been buried? How many other officers had been involved? Was Roberts the only one, or was he part of something larger? Internal Affairs spent months investigating but found no evidence of a wider conspiracy. Roberts seemed to have acted alone, a dirty cop who saw opportunities and took them, a man who valued money over justice, a man who let killers and abusers walk free as long as they could pay his price. The confession letter that led to finding Chloe was analyzed extensively. The handwriting was compared to known samples from persons of interest in the original investigation. They found a match, a man named Henry Turner. He had been interviewed back in 1998 because Chloe had disappeared near property his family owned. But he had an alibi. Witnesses who said he was at work when she went missing. The investigators at the time cleared him. They did not know that his alibi had been manufactured, that his co-workers had lied for him because he had paid them. Henry Turner died in 2015 from liver failure. He never faced justice for what he did. But at least now everyone knew the truth. Chloe's family held a funeral. 27 years after she disappeared, they finally laid her to rest. The department sent representatives. The chief spoke at the service. He apologized on behalf of the department for failing her, for allowing corruption to deny her justice, for leaving her in the ground for nearly 3 decades because one officer valued money over doing the right thing. It was one of the hardest things I have ever witnessed. The grief on her parents' faces, the anger, the exhaustion. They had spent most of their lives searching for answers. And those answers had been sitting in a box in an abandoned building the entire time. The old 5th Precinct building was demolished 2 months later. The city held a small ceremony before the demolition. They acknowledged the building's history, the good and the bad, the officers who had served honorably and the one who had betrayed everything the badge was supposed to represent. When the building came down, it felt like closing a chapter. But the damage Officer Roberts had done would never be fully undone. The families he had hurt would carry that pain forever. Mason and I were commended for finding that evidence, for bringing it forward, for making sure Chloe's case was finally resolved. But neither of us felt like heroes. We felt angry. Angry that it had taken 12 years and a scheduled demolition for the truth to come out. Angry that a little girl had been left in the ground because a cop decided money was more important than justice. And angry that we would never know if there were more cases, more victims, more buried evidence that would never be found. I drive past the empty lot where the 5th Precinct used to stand sometimes. They are building a community center there now. A place for kids. I think Chloe would have liked that. I think she would have liked knowing that the place where her justice was buried would become a place where children could be safe and happy. It does not fix what happened. Nothing can. But it feels like something. Like maybe some small piece of good came from something so deeply wrong. Officer Lily Nelson died 3 months before I joined the department, but I swear I have spoken to her over the radio. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like grief or stress or imagination. But I heard her voice multiple times. And what she told me saved my life and exposed a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone could have imagined. I joined the department in August. Lily had died in May. Line of duty death. That is what they called it. She had been responding to a domestic disturbance call when her patrol car went off the road and hit a tree at high speed. No witnesses, no skid marks, no indication she had tried to brake or swerve. The crash reconstruction team ruled it an accident. Excessive speed on a curved road, they theorized she had been distracted or possibly suffered a medical emergency. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of officers from across the state. Her call sign, Delta 7, was officially retired out of respect. No one would ever use that designation again. I learned all of this during my first week. Every new officer gets a tour and a history lesson. They showed me the memorial wall where Lily's photo hung alongside other fallen officers. They told me she had been a good cop, smart, dedicated, working her way toward detective. Everyone liked her, everyone missed her. And then they moved on. That is how it works in this job. You mourn, you remember, and then you keep going because the work does not stop. My first solo patrol was on a Friday night, late shift, 11 to 7. I was nervous but excited. This was what I had trained for. I was assigned to patrol the East District, the same area Lily had worked. My call sign was Delta 9. I spent the first few hours driving around, getting familiar with the streets, responding to minor calls. A noise complaint, a suspicious vehicle that turned out to be someone lost and using their phone for directions. Routine stuff. Then around 2 in the morning, I heard it. A voice on the radio. A woman's voice. Delta 9, this is Delta 7. You need to avoid the warehouse district on 10th Street. There is an ambush being set up. 3 armed suspects. They are targeting officers. I froze. Delta 7. That was Lily's call sign, but Lily was dead, and her call sign had been retired. I grabbed my radio and asked dispatch to repeat the transmission. Dispatch came back confused. They said they had not transmitted anything. They asked if I was okay. I told them I had heard a warning about an ambush on 10th Street. They said no such warning had been issued. I asked if any other units had transmitted on my channel. They said no. The channel had been silent for the past 10 minutes except for my transmission. I did not know what to do. I was new. I did not want to seem crazy or unreliable, but I also could not ignore what I had heard. I decided to drive past the warehouse district on 10th Street, not into it, just past it. I wanted to see if anything looked suspicious. As I approached, I saw 3 vehicles parked in an alley between 2 abandoned warehouses. No lights, engines off. I could see figures moving in the shadows. I radioed it in. Dispatch sent backup. 6 units responded. When we moved in, we found 3 men with rifles. They had been waiting for an officer to drive through that alley on routine patrol, waiting to ambush whoever came by. They were arrested without incident. During interrogation, they admitted they had been planning to shoot a cop, any cop. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to kill someone in uniform. I kept thinking about that radio transmission, about the voice that warned me. I asked other officers if anyone else had heard it. No one had. I pulled the dispatch recordings. There was no record of the transmission, just silence and then my voice asking dispatch to repeat. But I knew what I had heard. I knew that voice had saved my life. I just did not understand how. 2 weeks later, it happened again. I was on patrol driving through a residential area when I heard her voice. Delta 9, check the greenhouse on Maple Street. 2nd floor window. Someone is in danger. I responded immediately. I drove to Maple Street and found the greenhouse. I called for backup and approached. I could hear screaming from inside, a woman's voice yelling for help. We forced entry and found a domestic violence situation. The man had his partner barricaded in a bedroom and was trying to break down the door with a hammer. We arrested him. The woman was terrified but unharmed. She said if we had arrived 5 minutes later, he would have gotten through that door. She said he had been threatening to kill her. Again, I checked the dispatch logs. Again, there was no record of any transmission directing me to that house. No one had called it in. No one had reported the disturbance. I had only responded because of the voice on the radio. Lily's voice. It happened 2 more times over the next month. Each time her voice would warn me about something. A drunk driver about to cause an accident. A robbery in progress at a convenience store. Each time I would respond and find exactly what she had described. Each time dispatch would have no record of the transmission. Each time I would ask other officers if they had heard anything. They had not. It was only me. Only my radio. Only Lily's voice coming through when no one else could hear it. I started researching Lily's cases. I wanted to understand why she might be reaching out to me. Why she was still trying to help. I pulled every report she had filed in the 6 months before her death. I read through her case notes, her arrest records, her traffic stops, and I started to notice something strange. Lily had been investigating a pattern, a series of incidents involving officers from our department. She had documented times when evidence went missing, times when suspects were released without proper charges, times when reports were altered or cases were dropped without explanation. She had been building a file. She had been gathering proof of corruption. I found notes she had written, notes that were never entered into official reports, notes hidden in personal files that had been stored in her locker and never cleared out after her death. The notes described a network, 5 officers working together, taking bribes, protecting criminals, covering up crimes. Lily had been close to exposing them. She had been preparing to take her evidence to internal affairs. And then she died. I looked at the crash report again, the one that ruled her death an accident. I read through the details with fresh eyes: excessive speed, no attempt to brake, no skid marks. It did not make sense. Lily was an experienced driver. She knew that road. She would not have taken that curve at high speed, unless she had been forced off the road. Unless someone had run her off intentionally and then fled the scene before anyone arrived. I brought my suspicions to my sergeant. I showed him Lily's notes. I told him about the radio transmissions. He looked at me like I was losing my mind, but he agreed to look into it. He forwarded Lily's notes to internal affairs. They launched a quiet investigation. They started monitoring the 5 officers Lily had identified, watching their activities, tracking their cases, looking for patterns. Then one night I heard her voice again, but this time it was different. Delta 9, they know. They know you have the evidence. Be careful. Jackson is one of them. I felt my blood run cold. Jackson was my sergeant, the one I had given the notes to, the one who was supposed to be helping investigate. He was part of the corruption. He was one of the 5. I went directly to the chief. I bypassed Jackson entirely. I told the chief everything, about the notes, about the radio transmissions, about my suspicions regarding Lily's death. The chief listened. He did not dismiss me. He did not tell me I was crazy. He said he would handle it personally. He said he would bring in outside investigators. He said I needed to trust him and stay quiet until they had enough evidence to move. The investigation took 3 months. Internal Affairs worked with state police to build a case. They monitored communications, they reviewed financial records, they found evidence of bribes, evidence tampering, and conspiracy, and they found evidence that Lily's death had not been an accident. Security footage from a business near the crash site showed another vehicle following her that night, a vehicle that matched one owned by Jackson. Footage showed Jackson's vehicle speeding up as it approached Lily's car, showed it ramming into her rear bumper, showed her losing control and going off the road, showed Jackson stopping briefly and then driving away. 5 officers were arrested, Jackson and 4 others. They were charged with corruption, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and in Jackson's case, vehicular homicide. The trials took over a year. All 5 were convicted. Jackson received a life sentence for killing Lily. The others received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The department was rocked by the scandal. The chief resigned. Policies were changed. Oversight was increased. It was one of the darkest chapters in the department's history, but Lily had been vindicated. Her death had not been in vain. The corruption she had been investigating was exposed. The officers she had been trying to stop were brought to justice, and she had helped do it even after death. After the arrests were made, I heard her voice one final time. I was on patrol, driving through the East District when her voice came through the radio. "Thank you," that was all she said, just "thank you." And then her call sign officially retired. Delta 7 went silent. The transmission stopped. I never heard her voice again. I believe Lily stayed to finish what she started. I believe she could not rest until the truth came out, until the officers who killed her were held accountable. And I believe she chose me to help her because I was new, because I was not part of the corruption, because I could be trusted. I do not know how it worked. I do not know how a dead officer can transmit on a radio frequency that should not exist. I just know it happened. I know Lily Nelson saved my life, and I know she saved a lot of other lives by exposing that corruption ring. There is a new photo on the memorial wall now. Lily's photo has been moved to a place of honor. Underneath it is a plaque that says, "Officer Lily Nelson died in the line of duty exposing corruption. Her sacrifice brought justice. Her call sign will never be forgotten. Delta 7, gone but still protecting.